My name is Elena Sanchez, and at 29, I believed I had built a life as solid and serene as the Douglas firs that guard the Oregon coast. I had a career I was proud of, a quiet apartment in Portland that felt like a sanctuary, and enough savings to finally start dreaming of a small cottage of my own, a place with a garden and room for the silence my soul craved. I thought I had learned the most important lesson of my childhood, that the only true security is the one you build for yourself, brick by painstaking brick. Then came the family gathering in the gorge, a single weekend that proved my foundation was built on ground far more volatile than I had ever imagined. 48 hours after returning to the quiet of my life, I opened my banking app and watched my carefully constructed world dissolve. My entire savings, the culmination of a decade of discipline and sacrifice, $58,000, was gone. When I drove through the rain to my father's house, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, and asked him where it was, his answer was a gentle storm that leveled everything. He looked at me, his artist's eyes full of a sorrow that was somehow not for me, and said, "Mija, we had a need. It was for the family." Before I unravel the tapestry of that betrayal, let me first show you the threads from which it was woven. I grew up in a vibrant, chaotic home in Portland's Laurel Hill neighborhood, a house filled with the scent of oil paints, simmering adobo, and the constant, low hum of financial anxiety. My father, Ricardo Sanchez, was a man of immense charm and talent, an artist whose canvases captured the melancholic beauty of the Pacific Northwest. He loved with the force of a winter storm, but his grasp on practicality was as fleeting as the Oregon sunshine. He chased commissions that never materialized, invested in opportunities that were mirages, and believed that passion alone could pay the bills. My mother, Sophia, was his anchor and his opposite. A librarian with a love for order and the quiet certainty of the written word, she was the one who made sure the electricity stayed on and there was food in the pantry. Our home, a rambling craftsman that was always in a state of beautiful disrepair, was a physical manifestation of their dynamic. Dad's unfinished paintings leaned against walls Mom had just managed to have patched and painted. I remember being 10 years old, curled in the window seat of our living room, pretending to read while I listened to their hushed, tense arguments about using the grocery money to buy a rare pigment he insisted he needed. That night, watching my mother's shoulders slump in weary defeat, I made a silent vow. I would never be adrift. I would build my own harbor. By 15, I was shelving books at the very library my mother managed. At 17, I was a barista, the scent of coffee clinging to me long after my shifts ended. In college, while my friends explored the city's nightlife, I worked, splitting my time between a campus job and waiting tables at a farm-to-table restaurant downtown. Every dollar I earned, minus my meager living expenses, went into a savings account my mother had helped me open, an account she made sure my father knew nothing about. "You have my heart, but your grandmother's head for numbers," she would tell me, a gentle smile playing on her lips. She taught me about budgeting not as a restriction, but as a map to freedom. "Money doesn't buy happiness, mi amor," she'd say, her voice soft as worn book pages, "but it buys you choices. It gives you a quiet room to retreat to when the world is loud." I worked my way through Portland State University, stacking scholarships and part-time wages like carefully placed stones. There were years when I felt more like a machine than a person, fueled by caffeine and a relentless drive. But my mother was my constant cheerleader, leaving encouraging notes in my textbooks and bringing me thermoses of hot soup during late-night study sessions. My father would sometimes float the idea of borrowing from what he called my little nest egg, but my mother was a quiet fortress. "Elena's money is for Elena's future," she would state with a finality that even he couldn't argue with. When I graduated with a degree in finance and a specialization in sustainable investing, I had accomplished two things that felt like miracles. I had zero student debt and a job offer from a progressive wealth management firm downtown that aligned with my values. My starting salary was more than my parents had ever earned together in a single year. To celebrate, I bought my mother a first edition copy of her favorite novel, a gift whose cost would have once seemed astronomical. The look on her face was a memory I would later cling to like a life raft. 2 years into my career, the anchor of my world was gone. My mother suffered a brain aneurysm. It was sudden, a cruel and silent thief. She was gone in a matter of hours. I took a leave from work, existing in a fog of grief and logistics. In those first disorienting weeks, I clung to her last coherent words to me, whispered over the phone the day before she died, when she'd called just to see how my day was. "Promise me you'll look after your heart first, Elena," she'd said, her voice warm and clear. "Your father, he loves big, but he lives in the wind. Don't let him blow your roots away." I promised, sobbing, not understanding how terribly prophetic her words would become. After Mom's death, Dad unraveled. The vibrant chaos of our home curdled into a desolate silence. I paid off the last of their mortgage and helped with his bills, giving him space to grieve. What I didn't expect was how quickly he would try to fill that space. Isabella entered his life 6 months after my mother's funeral. She was a gallery owner, she said, and everything my mother was not: loud, polished, with a sharp, commercial glamour that seemed to dim whenever my father wasn't looking. She had a teenage son, Matteo, a sullen boy who communicated in monosyllables and seemed permanently attached to his phone. My father was utterly captivated. "She's brought the color back into my life, Mija," he told me, his eyes shining with a fervor that worried me. They were married in a small, lavish ceremony 8 months after they met. I wore a simple gray dress, unable to wear black but unwilling to feign celebration. My father, lost in the glow of his new beginning, didn't seem to notice my reservation. During this time, my relationship with my half-siblings, Leo and Sophia, grew more distant. They were from my father's first, brief marriage, and while we'd always maintained a cordial connection, they began spending more and more time at my father's house after Isabella arrived. They were drawn to the new energy, the sudden, inexplicable prosperity that had replaced the somber quiet of his grief. I retreated, focusing on my career and the quiet life I was building. By 29, I was a senior portfolio manager. I lived simply, still driving my reliable 10-year-old Subaru, preferring hikes in the forest park to expensive dinners. My savings account had grown to just over $58,000, money I saw as the foundation for my future cottage, my garden, my peace. I limited my visits with Dad and Isabella to obligatory holidays, the air between us thick with a polite, unspoken tension. When the email arrived inviting the extended family to a weekend at a rented cabin in the Columbia River Gorge, my immediate instinct was to decline. But a pang of guilt, a flicker of that old longing for the family I once had, made me click yes. It was just a weekend, I reasoned. I could handle anything for 2 days. I could not have known that those 2 days would unearth a truth so corrosive it would threaten to dissolve the very memory of the man I had once called my father. The cabin was nestled in a grove of old-growth cedars overlooking the majestic sweep of the Columbia River. I arrived on a Friday afternoon, the air thick with the scent of pine and impending rain. My modest sedan looked like a field mouse among the gleaming SUVs, and my father's new, top-of-the-line hybrid truck, a vehicle I'd never seen before. "Elena, you made it," my uncle, Tio David, greeted me with a warm hug. My aunt, Tia Carmen, stood behind him, her smile kind but her eyes shadowed with something I couldn't decipher. "We were worried you wouldn't come. We know how busy you are." I chose to ignore the subtle edge in her voice. "Wouldn't miss it," I lied, pulling my duffel bag from the trunk. The cabin was a cacophony of cheerful noise, a sprawling testament to my father's side of the family. I spotted him on the wide cedar deck, his arm draped around Isabella. She wore a silk kaftan that shimmered with every movement, and on her wrist, a heavy gold bracelet glinted in the fading light. "There's my girl," Dad exclaimed, his face lighting up as he came to embrace me. He smelled of a rich, woodsy cologne I didn't recognize. "Isabella, look who's graced us with her presence." Isabella air-kissed my cheeks, her perfume cloying. "Elena, darling. So glad you could tear yourself away from your spreadsheets. We were all starting to think you were a myth." I forced a smile. "Well, family is important." My father beamed, missing the irony completely. "That's my girl. Speaking of which, come see what I got for our adventures." He led me down a path toward the riverbank, where a sleek, modern kayak was tethered. Isn't she a beauty? Carbon fiber. Light as a feather. I stared at it. My mind, the financial analyst's mind, automatically calculated its cost. It's beautiful, Papa. That must have been quite an investment. He waved a dismissive hand. You only live once, right? After your mother, well, I realized life is for living, not just for saving. The casual way he invoked my mother's memory to justify an expense she would have found absurdly frivolous felt like a physical blow. Before I could form a reply, my half-siblings, Leo and Sophia, appeared. Elena, Sophia, now 19, gave me an awkward hug. She was dressed in designer jeans and a brand-name fleece I knew cost a small fortune. Didn't think you'd actually show. Leo, a newly minted 21-year-old, hung back. He looked uncomfortable, but I couldn't miss the expensive-looking watch on his wrist. Hey, he mumbled. Nice watch, I commented, my voice neutral. He glanced at it, a flicker of something pride, guilt, in his eyes. Graduation gift. From Papa and Isabella. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Leo had just finished a certificate program at a community college. The watch seemed wildly extravagant, especially given what I knew, or thought I knew, about my father's finances. The weekend unfolded in a series of strange, discordant notes against the beautiful backdrop of the gorge. Isabella spoke of their plans for a winter trip to a spa in Arizona. Mateo, her son, sulked in a corner with a brand-new, top-tier gaming laptop. During a family dinner, Sophia mentioned offhandedly that Dad had helped her with a down payment on a new car. Later that evening, I found myself in the kitchen with Tia Carmen, helping her dry dishes. Your father seems to be doing very well for himself, she remarked, her back to me. Apparently, I said. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. David and we lent him some money last year. For a medical procedure he said he needed. It was a significant amount. I stopped drying the plate in my hand. A medical procedure? My father had excellent insurance through his retirement plan. Her silence was confirmation enough. Well, she continued, scrubbing a pot with unnecessary vigor, he paid us back. Last month. In full. We were surprised. Before I could ask more, Tio David appeared in the doorway, his expression tight. Carmen, can I have a word? He led her out onto the porch, and through the window, I could see their tense, whispered argument before they noticed me watching and abruptly changed the subject to the weather. The strangest moment came on Saturday afternoon. We were all gathered on the deck, and I was showing my cousin some photos from a recent hike on my phone. Mateo, who had barely spoken 2 words all weekend, asked if he could see the pictures of Multnomah Falls. I handed him the phone and went to get a glass of water. When I returned a few minutes later, he handed it back to me quickly. I thought I saw him swipe away from an app that wasn't my photo gallery, but the moment was so fleeting I dismissed it. Cool Falls, he muttered, retreating to his corner. That evening, as the rain began to fall in earnest, my father found me alone by the fireplace. His expression was unusually serious. Mija, I worry about you, he began, his voice soft. You work so hard. Always saving, always planning. Your mother was like that, too. So focused on the storm clouds that she sometimes forgot to enjoy the sunshine. I stiffened. Mom was practical. She had to be. I know you always saw me as the dreamer, the irresponsible one, he continued, his eyes misty. But what is all that security for, if not to live? What is money for, if not to help the people you love? It's for independence, Papa, I said. It's for peace of mind. He looked at me with a strange, pitying expression. Family is the only real security, Elena. Not numbers in a bank. His words felt heavy, laden with a meaning I couldn't quite grasp. Before I could press him, Isabella called his name, her voice tinkling like brittle glass, and he was gone. The drive home on Sunday was a quiet one, the gray sky mirroring my own unsettled mood. Something was wrong. The sudden wealth, the carefully worded comments, the tension simmering beneath the forced smiles, it all felt like a painting where the colors were too bright, hiding something dark underneath. I didn't know it then, but I was driving away from the last moments of my life as I had known it. The carefully built harbor was about to be hit by a tsunami, and the warning signs I had seen were nothing compared to the storm that was already upon me. I arrived home to the comforting quiet of my apartment, the familiar scent of books and beeswax a balm to my frayed nerves. After unpacking, I curled up on my sofa with a cup of tea, the rhythmic drumming of rain against the window pane a familiar Portland lullaby. Almost as a reflex, a habit born of years of financial diligence, I opened my banking app on my phone. The world tilted. The numbers on the screen didn't make sense. I refreshed the page, my heart beginning to thud against my ribs. I refreshed it again. The balance in my savings account, which should have read $58,312.45, now displayed a stark, impossible figure, $312.45. A wave of cold dread washed over me. I navigated with trembling fingers to the transaction history. There it was, a series of 6 transfers, made over the past 2 days, to an account I had never seen before. Each transfer was just under $10,000, a clear strategy to avoid the automatic security triggers for large transactions. My breath caught in my throat. The timestamps. Friday afternoon, between 3 o'clock and 5 p.m. Saturday afternoon, between 2 o'clock and 4 p.m. The exact times when my phone had been out of my sight at the cabin. The time Mateo had borrowed it to look up a trail. My hands shook so badly I could barely dial the bank's 24-hour fraud line. The voice on the other end was calm and professional, a stark contrast to the chaos erupting inside me. He confirmed my worst fears. The transfers appeared legitimate, initiated from my device using my authenticated app. "This is fraud," I said, my voice a strained whisper. "I did not authorize these." The representative was sympathetic but firm. They would launch an investigation, but because the transfers were authenticated from my own device, recovery was not guaranteed. The process could take weeks, even months. As I hung up, the shock curdled into a white-hot rage. I knew. There was no doubt in my mind where my money had gone. The new truck. The watch. The captain. The trip to Arizona. My life savings, my future, my peace of mind, it had all been cashed in to fund their fantasy. I drove to my father's house in a daze, the rain-slicked streets of Portland a blur. I didn't call first. I parked my car and walked up the stone path to the front door of the house my mother had made a home, and I pounded on it with my fist. Isabella opened it, her practiced smile vanishing when she saw my face. "Elena, what on earth?" I pushed past her. My father was in his studio, a half-finished canvas on the easel, a glass of expensive-looking red wine in his hand. Mateo was on the sofa, engrossed in his phone. "Where is it?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a fury I had never known I possessed. My father turned, his expression of mild surprise shifting into something guarded. "Where is what, Mija?" "My money. The $58,000 you stole from my savings account. Give it back." The room fell silent. Mateo, without looking up, slipped out of the room. Isabella crossed her arms, a shield of defiance. My father's face was a canvas of conflicting emotions, not shock, not denial, but a strange, heartbreaking blend of justification and sorrow. "Elena, sit down," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. "Let's not be dramatic." "Dramatic? You emptied my bank account. There is nothing to discuss except you returning every single cent." "We didn't steal it," Isabella interjected, her voice sharp. "It was a loan. An investment in the family. You have been so blessed, Elena, while we have been struggling." I laughed, a raw, bitter sound. "Struggling? With new trucks and carbon fiber kayaks and designer watches? Is that what you call struggling?" My father set down his wine glass. His expression hardened. "That money was just sitting there, Elena. Gathering dust. We had a need. You have your career, your investments. You don't understand." "I understand that you are thieves." I yelled, the word tearing from my throat. "I worked for that money. I sacrificed for it. Every late night, every weekend, every holiday I missed. That was my future you stole." His face flushed. "I am your father. After everything I've given you." "Everything you've given me?" The dam of my restraint broke. Mom was the one who gave me everything. Mom was the one who sacrificed, who worried, who held us together while you chased your whims. She was the one who protected me from you. Isabella stepped forward, her glamour stripped away to reveal something cold and hard beneath. Your father has debts, Elena. Serious ones. From before he met me. People were making threats. We had no choice. So you steal from your daughter? I looked at my father, seeing him not as my charming, flawed dad, but as a stranger. A weak man who had made a monstrous choice. What happened to you? It's just money, he said, the words a final, devastating blow. You'll make more. Family is what matters. This isn't family, I said, my voice breaking. My mother would be so ashamed of you. The front door opened and my half-siblings, Leo and Sophia, walked in, their laughter dying as they took in the scene. They froze, their eyes darting between me and our father. Their expressions told me everything. They had known. Did you know? I asked them, my voice deadly quiet. Sophia looked at the floor. Leo wouldn't meet my eyes. The silence was an admission. You have 24 hours, I said, my voice now steady and cold as ice. You will return my money. All of it. Or I am going to the police. My father let out a short, disbelieving laugh. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't send your own father to jail. Watch me, I said. As I turned to leave, my father's final words stopped me at the door. You walk out that door, Elena, you do this. You are no longer my daughter. I turned back, the tears I had been holding back finally spilling down my cheeks. You made that choice when you logged into my bank account. You're the one who destroyed this family, not me. I walked out into the relentless rain, the door closing behind me with a soft, final click. I felt as if I had lost my family all over again. The first time had been to death. This time, it was to a betrayal so deep it felt like it had hollowed out my entire past, leaving nothing but a cold, empty space where love and trust used to be. Back in my apartment, the sanctuary now felt like a cage. The silence that I usually cherished was deafening, amplifying the storm of betrayal, grief, and rage inside me. I collapsed onto my sofa, the sobs coming in great, shuddering waves. Through my tears, I made the one call I knew I could. Chloe? I managed to choke out when my best friend answered. Something terrible has happened. I'll be there in 15 minutes, she said, her voice instantly shifting from cheerful to fiercely protective. Don't do anything. Just wait for me. True to her word, Chloe arrived with a pint of salted caramel ice cream and a clear-headed calm that was the antidote to my chaos. She sat with me on the floor of my living room, listening without interruption as the whole ugly story poured out of me. When I finished, she took my hand. You know you have to report them, right? She said gently. This isn't a family argument, Elle. This is a felony. He's my father, I whispered, the words sounding foreign and hollow. No, she said firmly. A father doesn't do this. Your mom. Sophia would want you to fight for yourself. She taught you to be strong for a reason. The thought of my mother, of her quiet strength and her fierce love, was the spark I needed. The next morning, my eyes swollen and my heart heavy, I called a lawyer a colleague had recommended. Her name was Anya Davies, and she specialized in financial fraud. Miss Davies's office was a haven of calm competence. As I recounted the story, she listened intently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. Miss Sanchez, she said, her voice direct but not unkind, let's be clear. You have a very strong case for civil recovery. A criminal case will be more complex, but the theft is undeniable. The question you have to answer is not whether you can proceed, but whether you are prepared for the consequences of doing so. What consequences? The complete and total fracture of your family, she said without sugarcoating. In my experience, when a situation like this arises, the family was already broken. The theft was just a symptom. Are you ready to treat the disease? Her words resonated with a painful clarity. I signed the retainer agreement. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. The bank's internal investigation confirmed the transfers were initiated from my device, making it a difficult case for them to pursue, but their data provided crucial evidence for my civil suit. I documented everything, the timeline of the reunion, the text messages, the overheard conversations. 3 days after my confrontation at the house, with no money returned and no word from my father, Ms. Davies filed the lawsuit. The server delivered the papers to my father at his home, where Isabella undoubtedly intercepted them. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years felt compelled to weigh in. Some, like Tia Carmen, sent quiet messages of support. "I am so sorry, Elena. Your father, he has not been himself for a long time." Others condemned me. "How could you do this to your own blood?" a cousin texted. "Family problems should be handled in private." The most painful messages came from Leo and Sophia. Leo's was short and cruel. "You've destroyed this family. I hope you're happy." Sophia's was more conflicted, a jumble of anger and fear. "Dad is a wreck because of you. Why couldn't you just let it go?" I didn't respond. Ms. Davies had advised radio silence. My father tried calling, leaving rambling, manipulative voicemails. One moment he was furious, the next he was pleading, talking about how this lawsuit would ruin his reputation in the art community. The lies were breathtaking in their audacity. He even sent a text suggesting I had verbally agreed to the loan and had simply forgotten. A week after filing the suit, an unexpected ally emerged. My tia Ines, my mother's older sister who lived in San Diego, called me. We weren't close, but she had always shared my mother's practical, no-nonsense view of the world. "I heard what Ricardo did," she said, her voice crackling with indignation. "I'm not surprised. I'm just sorry. Your mother, she spent her whole life cleaning up his messes, trying to shield you from his weather. I'm glad you're not doing the same." Her words were a validation that I desperately needed. The legal discovery process unearthed the true depth of their financial ruin. They had a second mortgage on the house. Credit cards were maxed out. Isabella's gallery was a failing business propped up by a series of loans. And then there was the gambling. Bank statements revealed regular, large cash withdrawals from casinos across the state line in Washington. My father, the sensitive artist, had a severe gambling addiction he had masterfully concealed. 2 weeks into the process, I was working late when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Don't hang up," a small voice whispered. It was Sophia. "I have to tell you something. You can't tell anyone I called." "I'm listening," I said, my heart pounding. It was Isabella's idea, she blurted out, the words tumbling over each other. All of it. She told Dad it was the only way to pay off the people he owed. "Mateo, he knows how to do things with phones. He bragged about it." There was a pause, and then her voice dropped even lower. "They did it to Abuela before she died. Not as much, but they did. And I think they did it to Tia Carmen, too. This is what they do." My blood ran cold. This wasn't a one-time act of desperation. It was a pattern. A predatory system. After the call, I relayed the information to Ms. Davies, who immediately hired a private investigator to dig into Isabella's past. The next day, I came home from work to find my apartment door unlocked. My laptop, which contained all my documented evidence and correspondence with my lawyer, was gone. Nothing else was touched. The message was clear: intimidation. That night, an anonymous call. A gruff voice. "Drop the lawsuit. It's better for everyone." Instead of frightening me, it solidified my resolve. This was bigger than my stolen money. Ms. Davies helped me get a temporary restraining order against my father and Isabella. I changed the locks on my door and installed a security system. The private investigator's findings were explosive. Isabella was not Isabella. Her real name was Marisol Vargas, and she had a history of fraud charges in Arizona and Nevada. Her MO was textbook: target grieving, financially vulnerable men, indebt them, isolate them, and then systematically drain their assets, often using her tech-savvy son as a tool. My father wasn't just a perpetrator, he was also her latest mark, his grief and weakness, making him the perfect victim. This knowledge didn't absolve him, but it reframed the tragedy. He was a man drowning in his own sorrow who had grabbed onto a hand that promised to save him, not realizing it intended to pull him under completely. As the date for our court-mandated mediation approached, a strange sense of calm settled over me. My anger had cooled into a clear, cold purpose. This wasn't just about getting my money back anymore. It was about exposing a predator. It was about justice, not just for me, but for my mother's memory, and for all the other victims she had left in her wake. It was about tearing down the beautiful, rotten facade to reveal the truth, no matter how ugly. 2 days before the mediation, my phone rang after midnight. It was Leo, his voice strained with a panic that sounded genuine. "You need to come to the hospital. Ansu. It's Dad. He tried to kill himself." The 20-minute drive to the hospital on Marquam Hill was a lifetime. My mind was a vortex of conflicting emotions, suspicion, guilt, anger, and a stubborn, deep-seated flicker of concern. Was this real, or was it the ultimate manipulation? I found Leo alone in the stark, sterile waiting room, looking small and lost. "Pills," he said before I could ask. "Isabella found him. They pumped his stomach. He's stable." "Where is she?" I asked, scanning the empty room. "Talking to the police. She's telling them the lawsuit drove him to it. That it's your fault." I closed my eyes, absorbing the sickening, predictable blow. "And what do you think?" Leo stared at his hands for a long moment. I think this has all gone too far. All of it." He finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "I didn't know about the money, Al." "Not really. Dad just said you were helping them out." "I swear." Before I could respond, a nurse called my father's name. We followed her to a private room where he lay, pale and diminished against the crisp white sheets. He looked smaller. The vibrant charisma that had always defined him leached away, leaving only a fragile, broken man. His eyes fluttered open as we entered, widening when he saw me. "Elena," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. "I'll give you a minute," Leo said, backing out of the room. I stood at the foot of the bed, a chasm of silence between us. Part of me wanted to rage at him, to accuse him of this final, desperate gambit. But another part of me only saw the man who had taught me how to ride a bike, whose shoulders I had ridden on at the Rose Festival. "Is this another lie, Papa?" I asked, my voice flat. "Another performance?" He flinched, a flicker of pain in his eyes that had nothing to do with the 4 in his arm. "I deserve that," he rasped. I've destroyed everything. Your mother." Sophia would be so ashamed. "Yes," I said, refusing to soften the truth. "She would." Tears welled in his eyes and traced paths through the stubble on his cheeks. "I don't expect you to forgive me. Or even believe me. I need you to know. Isabella, she's not who you think she is." "I know who she is," I said quietly. "I know her name is Marisol Vargas. The private investigator found her." My father's eyes widened in genuine shock. "You know? I know about Arizona. I know about the gambling. I know about Abuela's savings and Tia Carmen's loan." He closed his eyes, a shudder racking his body. "It started so small. After your mom died, I was so lost. The casino, it was just a place to go where nothing mattered. And Marisol, she made me feel alive again. By the time I understood what was happening, I was in too deep. The debts, the lies, it was a landslide." "That doesn't excuse what you did to me." "No," he agreed, his voice cracking. "Nothing does. I just want you to know." I let her convince me. I went along with it. "I betrayed you. I betrayed your mother's memory." I stood in silence, my anger warring with a profound, aching pity. I couldn't offer absolution, but I couldn't sustain the rage in the face of his utter brokenness. "The men I owe money to," he continued, a new urgency in his voice. "They are not good people, Elena. Marisol, she told them about you. About your savings. Where you live." A chill went through me. "Is that a threat?" "No," he insisted, trying to sit up. "It's a warning. Be careful. She is capable of things you can't imagine." The door swung open and Isabella Marisol swept in, a police officer trailing in her wake. Her face was a mask of tragic concern, but her eyes, when they met mine, were chips of black ice. "What is she doing here?" she demanded, her voice rising theatrically. "She is the one who did this to him." I turned back to my father. "The mediation is in 2 days. I will be there. So will my lawyer. You need to think about what kind of man you want to be." As I walked past Marisol, she grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "This isn't over," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. I pulled my arm away. "You're right about that," I said, and walked out. The next day, as I was meeting with Ms. Davies to prepare for the mediation, the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Sophia called again, this time from a friend's phone, her voice shaking but resolute. "I have it," she said. "Mateo's backup hard drive. He's paranoid, he copies everything. It has records, screenshots of their chats planning it, everything. I'm bringing it to the mediation tomorrow." "Sophia, are you sure? Are you safe?" "No," she said honestly. "But I'm more afraid of what I'll become if I stay silent." The mediation was held in a neutral conference room in a downtown office building, the view of the West Hills shrouded in a persistent drizzle. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken resentments. My father sat beside his attorney, looking gaunt and hollowed out. Marisol sat next to him, a portrait of wifely devotion in a conservative gray suit, her eyes burning holes into me. Tia Carmen was there at my request, and Leo and Sophia sat in the chairs against the wall, a visible rift between them. The session began, and it was a slow, painful recitation of facts. My father's lawyer tried to frame it as a family misunderstanding, a loan gone sour. But then Ms. Davies calmly presented the evidence from the private investigator, Marisol's history of fraud, her real identity, the pattern of her predation. The turning point came when Ms. Davies announced she had a new piece of evidence. Sophia walked forward and placed the external hard drive on the table. "This is my stepbrother's," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "It contains evidence of how he and his mother planned and executed the theft from my sister's account, as well as from other family members." Marisol lunged forward, a snarl twisting her face. "You little traitor." The mediator called for order, but it was too late. The carefully constructed facade had shattered. Faced with irrefutable proof, my father seemed to deflate. He looked at Marisol, truly seeing her for the first time, not as his savior, but as his destroyer. Then he looked at me. "It's all true," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying across the silent room. He turned to the mediator. "Everything my daughter has accused me of is true. I am responsible." He began to speak, not to the lawyers or the mediator, but to me. He confessed everything, the depth of his gambling addiction, the way Marisol had exploited his grief, how he had allowed himself to be convinced that taking my money was a justifiable act. "I was drowning," he said, his voice breaking. "And instead of learning to swim, I pulled my own daughter under with me. Your mother, she was my compass. Without her, I was lost, and Marisol gave me a new map. I just didn't realize it led off a cliff." The raw, unvarnished confession was more powerful than any legal argument. There was nowhere left for the lies to hide. The mediation ended with a clear ruling, full restitution of all stolen funds, plus damages. More importantly, the mediator, a retired judge, announced he was forwarding the entire case file, including the hard drive and the PI's report, to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. As we filed out of the room, Marisol was detained for questioning. She shot me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. My father, flanked by his lawyer, paused as he passed me. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you," he said, not meeting my eyes. "But I am going to get help. Real help. Not for us. There may not be an us anymore. But I have to try to be the man your mother thought I was." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something much more fragile, a single, uncertain step out of the wreckage. In the months that followed, the world slowly began to find its shape again. The legal victory was a hollow thing, a necessary procedure that couldn't mend the wound. The money was returned to my account, but the trust it represented was gone forever. I started seeing a therapist, a kind woman who helped me understand that grief can be for the living too. "You are grieving the father you thought you had," she told me. "And you are grieving the family that could have been. Allow yourself that." My father entered an inpatient treatment program for his gambling addiction. 3 weeks in, a letter arrived, his familiar, artistic script on the envelope a jolt to my system. I let it sit on my counter for a full day before I found the courage to open it. It was not a plea for forgiveness. It was a confession, a self-inventory, a painful and honest accounting of his failures. "I am not writing this for you to forgive me," he concluded. "I am writing because you deserve the truth, and because the man your mother loved would want you to know that he is fighting to find his way back from the wilderness." Small, green shoots of new relationships began to emerge from the scorched earth. Tia Carmen and I started having coffee once a week, her stories of my mother filling in the gaps of my memory. I learned that Sophia had enrolled in community college, using part of the settlement I had quietly placed in an educational trust for her and Leo. It wasn't an act of forgiveness, but an act of hope, a belief that the cycle of dysfunction could be broken. 6 months after the mediation, I finally made the trip I had been dreaming of for so long. I drove out to the coast and put a down payment on a tiny cottage in Manzanita, a windswept little town nestled between the ocean and the mountains. It had a small patch of land, big enough for a garden. A year after the day my world fell apart, I agreed to meet my father for a walk on the beach near my new home. He was thinner, his hair grayer, but his eyes were clear for the first time in years. We walked in silence for a long time, the roar of the Pacific a constant companion. "She would have loved this," he said, gesturing to the wild, beautiful coastline. "Your mother?" "Yes," I said. "She would have." He stopped and turned to me. "I know sorry is a useless word. It doesn't fix what I broke. But I want you to know. I am working every day to honor her memory by being a better man." I looked out at the endless expanse of the ocean. The path to forgiveness felt just as vast, a wilderness I was not yet ready to explore. But for the first time, standing on my own solid ground, on the land I had fought for, I felt I had the strength to find my way. I had lost the family I thought I knew, but in doing so, I had found a resilience I never knew I had. I had learned my mother's final lesson, that the only roots that can truly hold you steady in a storm are the ones you grow yourself.